Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effect podcast. And today we're going to be doing part 4 of our heavy rain analysis series. And we're starting off with our FBI agent Norman Jayden and a nice chase scene to start off with, lads. So, I mean, there's not a lot to say here, is there? But what are your general thoughts about this scene?
Yeah, I mean, this is the mission that is you can get the funniest clips on YouTube if you deliberately fail the QuickTime events. It's funny just messing up as Norman and seeing him slip around the fish market. So that's always fun to do if anyone ever wants to replay it and see that. We kind of mentioned it in the last episode, but really cool to see the varying dialogues with Blake and Norman at the start of the car. It's nice as well that Norman can get a bit of a clap back at Blake when he complains that if you don't shoot Nathaniel, and then you can kind of tell him, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were a big boy, who grew up as a street cop." And then it's nice to see Blake's face diminish there. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, one thing that I wanted to say, comparing it to Detroit Become Human a bit, is that this whole chapter is kind of like The Nest. Only if you merged it with Nathaniel's, going to some creepy sort of dodgy apartment and then getting this really cool chase scene. But The Nest almost does it better, and then it merges it in two. So it just goes to show you how Quantic Dream, you could argue they've probably evolved, and it was just a nice little thing to notice that they've kind of done those two chapters merged as one, and it works really well. The only other sort of points I've got to mention about this scene is that I think everyone playing from the get-go knew it wasn't this bold guy. We just knew he couldn't be the killer. It just didn't really fit the motive and stuff, and it's just you're blindly chasing this guy. So it almost just seems style over substance. You've got a fun scene, and it's just wildly blaming some suspect just to kind of get you there. But yeah, otherwise though, it's a really fun scene. I like the variety as well. You mentioned the chase stuff as well, but then there's the whole thing about dodging things, and then there's that section where you're in the meat locker with the hanging meats. So yeah, just a nice little change, and it goes to show you why people really rate Norman's scenes the most. They are certainly fun. You can't take that away from him.
I was going to ask you actually, do you even know why they were going after that bold guy? I think it's Corder, isn't it, his name? Yeah, Corder. Do you even know why they're going after him in the first place? Because I don't actually recall hearing any dialogue, or just maybe I just tuned out or whatever, but yeah, why they were going for that guy.
Well, I guess the last time we sort of see Norman and Blake, they're in that meeting, aren't they? And I guess it matches the age profile and the geolocation. So I think Blake probably wildly accuses it oh, this guy matches the description, this guy will be perfect. But I don't know, he almost seems kind of thuggish. But the origami killer is clearly someone who's quite a sophisticated serial killer who almost sees it as an art. So it always seems really far-fetched to me.
Oh, fair enough. But honestly, what you were saying before about purposely screwing it up, I'm pretty sure I saw a video on this. I think it was Call Me Kevin did a video on it, and it's just absolutely hilarious. With the bit where he's skid along the floor on the ice and just bumping into people. Yeah, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, in terms of trivia stuff, not really a lot to go on this scene. I mean, I've got a bit here. It says that if you fail to capture Corder, the beginning of the chapter police news with Norman will change. Okay, so yeah, moving on from there, we then join Scott Shelby, who has a visitor in Lauren, who basically wants to come in and assist with his investigation, really. But I wanted to bring something up a little bit beforehand that just sort of made me laugh, and I don't know, it's a little bit of an inconsistency, a little bit of a nitpick, and a bit of a flaw in the game. When I mentioned in the first episode about Scott's thoughts, well, there's an example here where as he's walking around, he says something. It says, "I haven't been sleeping well since the murders started up again." I'm sort of sat there. I mean, I know we've said we wouldn't go into spoiler territory, but I think everyone knows what I'm on about here. And I'm just sort of really? That's... I know that you're trying to dissuade the player from thinking that this person is actually guilty, but at the same time, I'm it's gotta make sense to me. And why, unless he's got some sort of multiple personality thing where he didn't know he was doing the killings, I don't know, it's just a little bit of a nitpick on my end, mate. I don't know if that's something you noticed as well.
Yeah, I don't remember that one particularly, but when we mentioned the thoughts thing, how it's a really cool idea because if you're walking from one side of the room to the other, it's something to do. And I actually really like it as kind of just like, like in Life is Strange, you hit the pause menu, Max's thoughts are in a diary. This is just something more interactive to have it in the moment, which I really like. But yeah, obviously with Scott, the whole thing can become quite convoluted. And I think the way around it is to maybe make his thoughts quite vague or away from that topic. But if you're going to throw comments in there like that, then yeah, it makes it a flaw.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, as much that nothing really happens in this scene too much. Obviously, she brings a letter that was posted to her husband before the son, disappeared, etc. I suppose it's quite a significant scene because this is where we see, and obviously we know who Scott is. He then decides to team up with the mother of a son that he killed, which is very dark in itself, isn't it? So I feel like it was sort of noteworthy to mention. But then before you know it, we're heading over to Kramer's mansion for perhaps one of the more fun scenes in the game. Certainly it's a little bit of comic relief in places, mate, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, big time. I just want to say as well, like with Lauren, she probably is the coolest non-playable character in this game. So it is just really cool to, get, these extra scenes with her. We knew it would be a matter of time because we handed her the business card at the start. So we always gathered she would play a bigger role in the game. But I do agree, mate. It is a bit weird that we keep her around, considering the whole, twist to the game. And I do think it is a bit of a weak reason why he does, because she decides to keep the envelope, even though you've looked at it and you already know what the evidence is. So it almost doesn't make sense on that part. But yeah, I mean, moving forward, I absolutely love Kramer's Party. It is one of the funnest missions in the game. It's just cool going around and seeing all the drunk people. You can, talk to that drunk guy, doing that whole thing, oh, that guy spoke about your mother or whatever. What I like as well is that you just have drunk people stumbling about everywhere. There's, a girl drinking, not even on a sofa, but just in the entrance, right next to the front door. So it's probably quite drafty, so I was always concerned for her health and safety there. But also there's just a guy that's passed out on the pool table. Now, Jack, me and you are quite big fans of, the pool game. We play it quite a bit whenever we meet up. I can see us two wanting to have a game at that party, and then for just this drunk guy to be laid out on the table, we'd be like, oh, really, mate? Can you not, fuck off? But yeah, everything about this whole scene is just really cool. I like just the little details, you can go into some empty spaces, but they look quite nice. I particularly like when you go outside where there's the pool and you can just see the rain hit it. Another thing as well, mate, is it's pretty cool. I learned this in the stream, right? But I didn't know there's multiple ways of distracting the guards. I've always used the same way I've always done it, getting the drunk guy to start on someone so they leave. But someone in the stream tells me that you can get Lauren to distract the guards. I've never seen that, but I just think it's cool that there's, again, varied paths to kind of achieve what you need to do.
It makes perfect sense because actually something I was going to raise, it did make me laugh and I was watching the stream back. You when you're walking around the party and chatting to people and stuff, and then you just see Lauren sat on this little couch, and then there's that two people making out right next to her. It must be so dead awkward that it's actually nice to hear that she does have a purpose, to being there to actually help Scott get upstairs. So do you know what it is that she does to distract the guards then?
I don't actually. I'm going to have to find out afterwards, but I imagine she's just going to cause a scene or I don't know, gut punch one of them and run or something. That's what I imagine it would be. But yeah, no, I mean, I'll try and find footage up and put it on now, hopefully.
All right, good stuff. I mean, obviously we do get past the guards and then get upstairs, and then we meet Kramer's son, Gordy, which straight off the bat, I'm going to say, he gives this speech where he's, he's just playing along. He's telling Shelby what he wants to hear. He's saying, oh, yes, I'm the origami killer. There's something about that speech and just the camera work and just, I don't know, just the general thing. It's so chilling and quite uneasy, especially with the innocent sort of kid-like animation in the background. It just doesn't work. If you combine what he's saying with what's in the background, it just sort of doesn't make sense, and that's what creates a level of unease. It obviously then breaks out. You get an achievement, don't you, if you beat the two guards that come in. But what did you think about the whole upstairs bit, lad?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. Like you say, he is quite a chilling person. The way that he's got these girls making out next to him, but he's just focused on his cartoons, even though he's like an adult in his dressing gown or whatever it is. Fun fact for you, that animation that is on the screen. Now, I'm not going to claim I knew this. This is someone I think Felicie taught me, because Felicie's just a wealth of knowledge. But that whole animation is from a French animation school that David Cage, the director of this game, works closely with. So yeah, it's cool that you kind of just let, like a little, I guess, like, school project out into the game, which is really neat. A little inconsistency though that apparently can happen is he'll often say something along the lines of, "Oh shush, this is my favourite part." If you hang around long enough before you achieve that dialogue, he can say that on the credits, which I find quite funny that he shushes you on the credits. But yeah, otherwise though, like, quite a welcome scene, very chilling character. Like you said in the last episode, mate, every location and every mission has its own sort of character and flavour and colour palette, and it's the same with this.
Okay, so we're now moving back over to Ethan, who's going to be doing Trial 2 in his quest to try and save his son, Sean. And I think he turns up with like this disused power plant, I think, where there's loads of like electric pylons. Gotta call it out, it's the Butterfly Effect podcast. There's a butterfly slap bang on the wall. And mate, general thoughts on the trial? Difficult?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like, it's a different kind of difficult, which I like, because, like, we mentioned how in the first trial, it's difficult because you've got quick, flashy QTEs. This is difficult in the sense that, the hardest part is probably the last bit where you've got to go through the electrical cables, but it's the quick time event where you have to hold multiple ones down at the same time. So, that can be really challenging itself. But, I go to say that I think, not just because we're the Butterfly Effect podcast, but I think this is my favourite trial. In terms of the location, it's really chilling. The fact that you've got to go through all these dark tunnels to get to where you need to. Just a really elaborate setup. I think it's more believable as well, because I think, the killer can set this up and no one's going to go down to really see it, Yeah, and it's just cool. Another little detail I like as well, mate, is the fact that there are multiple ways to enter the plant. You can go along the outside, find a way through the barbed wire. You can go to the right, climb over the wall. So, just again, things that don't really matter too much, but they still give you different branching for tiny details, which I really appreciate. I love the fact as well that they, like, give you the coward way out. There's that door that says coward written on it, and you can, like, choose not to do it, even though you can get quite far. The other cool thing I've got to mention as well, I think I mentioned it in the last one perhaps, but if you do get zapped by any electricity, Ethan will get electrical burns that Madison will have to patch up later. So it's cool that you get rewarded for not getting, burnt. And then, you can have like a healthier Ethan by the end of it. The only nitpick I have with this trial is just, we all know it, but the fact that he doesn't brush the glass to the side. He just crawls through it slowly. Doesn't really make that much sense. I think we'd all just brush it with our arm, pretty unharmed. And turning around in those tunnels was an absolute nightmare. The amount of like 360 spins I kept doing because of the camera work, quite tricky. But nonetheless, though, really good trial, lad. How about you? Did you like it?
Yeah, I think it was a good trial. I'm going to sort of start off because I think what you touched on there about the burns and the way that can carry forward to Madison, it actually reminded me of something that I missed to say earlier on as well, is that if when Lauren turns up to Scott's house, if in the previous scene, or an earlier scene with Scott, if he didn't go and interrupt when Troy went into her house and obviously he beats her, she turns up with a black eye. So again, that's just like another little hint of how the choices can impact, even in a very small way later on in the game. But yeah, obviously back to this trial, I like it. The whole glass bit, really good, really claustrophobic. And obviously you've got to move very slowly as well. I don't know if it makes a difference. I'm not sure if Ethan can die or not. I would assume not. But yeah, nonetheless, very good. A nitpick again though. And I was thinking there's a lot of glass, and obviously there's lots of different tunnels that you can take in that particular bit, right? And the only way you've got to find the right way is by using the match or the lighter. How did the killer get all of that broken glass? Also, dare I say it, given the size of the man in question, how did they get all that glass in all those tunnels and just, not come out of it a little bit fucked up? Do you get what I mean, mate?
I do, yeah. Like, he obviously probably knew the route, so he could do the thing where he did it behind him. I don't know, but I imagine it involved quite a bit of planning, and maybe an alias as well. Because I do agree, I don't think they're fitting in there like 100%.
Because I know you brought it up with like the little slide bit, when Ethan opens the thing, so it goes down the slide. But I was also thinking damn, how did he get all that glass in the tunnels as well? But back onto a more serious side of things, I've got a little bit of trivia here. I don't know if you know this, but presumably it's obviously if you explore those tunnels more, but it's possible for Ethan to find a dead body while crawling through the maze of tunnels. The body is almost certainly that of another victim's father who undertook the trial in an attempt to rescue his son but failed and succumbed to his wounds. The intact state of the corpse indicates that the death occurred recently. This means it is most likely the body of Mr. Bowles, Susan Bowles' husband, and the father of Jeremy Bowles, the origami killer's most recent victim. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, that's who Scott visited, right? Where
the suicide baby chapter. Yeah.
So if that's true, wow, again, it would be, going back on future replays and purposely screwing up, and imagine you just stumbling across that and just again, these little hidden things that are really, really effective in Heavy Rain and Quantic Dream games in general.
I actually love everything about that, because I always thought we probably don't know much about the other dads that are going through the trials. The only one we really meet is Hassan, right? And he kind of says, oh, this shoebox didn't help me find my son, and hands it back to you. So maybe he didn't really try. But, we mentioned flaw in the first trial that is what if someone crashed a car and then they didn't progress? So does Scott have to constantly check in a different car each time? So it's cool to see that someone stumbled at the second hurdle at the butterfly trial. But no, I never knew there was a dead body there, but I absolutely love that information.
Yeah, and then obviously the only other things that, it probably explains itself, but obviously if you give up the trial, if you go through the coward door, you do get an achievement, and equally you get an achievement for passing the trial as well. So yeah, we're now heading over to Madison in the chapter called The Nurse. Now I want to throw straight over to you, mate, because I recall you saying in the stream that you're not too big a fan of the fact that Madison just becomes a bit of a default nurse for Ethan at this point. So yeah, obviously take it away.
Yeah, obviously, for those that have played the game, it strongly recovers. Madison gets some cool chapters, but it's just the fact that Madison so far at this point in the game, we've had sleepless nights, and then she's just instantly the nurse. So it's kind of you have these cool trials and missions from the three men of that you play as, but then Madison's just this kind of guardian angel figure, and I was just crying out for more from her. And because this is what she's done 2 chapters back to back in Madison's case, I just was sat there at the time nah, there has to be more to her than this. We're not having a playable character that's just there to pick up the pieces and patch Ethan up each time. So yeah, it's not a nitpick that stays there, but it's definitely one I had at this point in the game on my blind playthrough, or my blind vision anyway.
Yeah, that's more than fair. And to be honest, not much else happens in this chapter. They have a little bit of chat, don't they? She starts probing him a little bit, but again, he's telling her to basically bugger off because he doesn't want her to get involved and endanger herself. So we will move swiftly on to another cutscene involving Grace, who has, completely turned on Ethan. She's just gone to the police and told them that she recalls a time when he come in and he was holding an origami figure at 3 a.m. and he was drenched. So I know you mentioned at the top of this series that you were not a big fan of Grace, mate. I imagine it's got even worse, right, by this little revelation that she told Blake.
Yeah, I think it's plausible what she says. The whole thing, oh yeah, Ethan has blackouts, he talks about the rain. That is pretty sus, and you have to come clean about that if it means saving Sean, because clearly she wants to save her kids, so she is gonna provide that information, so she's kind of right to do so. So yeah, maybe less nitpicky at her. Maybe, like, again, we all know I absolutely hate Blake. It's just the fact that, like, the moment she says that, they all piggyback on, oh, it's definitely Ethan. But what Norman sort of says throughout the chapter is, like, it doesn't make sense that a dad would, like, kill 8 other kids and then go and kill their own. It doesn't make sense. So it's just the fact that they all piggyback off this thing. So yeah, it's that really, mate.
And when you did play it in your blind playthrough, was there ever a part of you that thought, oh damn, like it might be him?
It's a good point. I didn't really think so, no. We recently played that game Twin Mirror, and they throw a similar thing where, you know, your person suffers from, like, blackouts, or, like, they wake up and then, like, you know, a murder happens when, you know, like, you were drunk or whatever it was. And it's kind of one of those ones where I was like, this would be cool if they actually went for that twist. But I feel Heavy Rain did it well, where they teased it, where it's an avenue and a possibility that maybe some people fell for. But I never really did, and I'm glad I didn't. But equally, though, I didn't actually get the final twist correct myself either, so it's one of those.
Yeah, like the thing is, I think it's also as well, like, you know, when a game like sort of self-acknowledges like a certain suspect, it's the same with like a film or a TV series, that you immediately think, oh well, immediately it's not going to be them then. But I think what is interesting is that it does maybe somewhat hint at the fact that, you know, there is a playable character that could well be the killer. I don't know, that might be a bit of a stretch. But I mean, nonetheless, we do move on to the shrink scene, right? It's Blake and Norman. They're there interrogating him. And I imagine this is the bit, mate, where your previous decisions when you were playing with Ethan, when he's with the shrink, that can come to pass, right? He can dob you in.
I believe so, yeah. Like, I think he'll do it regardless, but I do think certain dialogue things you can tell the shrink, he will relay it. So, like, it's just a bit of a passing scene, really. You know what? I will add on top of this, mate. I'm not the biggest fan of this scene for the pure reason that it does feel a bit of a rehash from the Nathaniel scene, where you've just got Blake beating up a, you know, innocent person, and you're just Norman in the background telling him to stop, or like to encourage him, whatever it is. Like I say, like, I had the frustration that I clearly was like, well, I don't think it is Ethan. So it just felt like a copy and paste job again on the Nathaniel scene. So I just, wasn't big on this whole part of the game, mate.
I mean, the thing is, with like, until he started physically threatening the shrink, I was actually with Blake. For a certain point, it might be controversial, but like the fact that it's a murder investigation, this shrink is like constantly like holding back, sort of like, oh, client confidentiality and all that sort of thing, when he knows that there's like children that are missing, or the children that have died as a result of this killer. But then, you know, Blake, he goes one step too far, doesn't he? He starts like grabbing him by the shirt and starts, you know, wanting to hit him and stuff like that. So yeah, you are right. It does feel like a little bit of a rehash, to be honest. And then of course, going on from there, we are back with Scott again, who has got a meeting with Kramer, obviously the father of the guy that we met at the party in an earlier sequence. Again, there's not a lot here, is there? It's just a bit of back and forth, isn't it, between them? He's clearly trying to buy Scott round. But if I'm honest, and then again, this is something that comes to me as I was watching this scene. Again, knowing what we know, I was thinking to myself, why is Scott pushing so hard for this guy? You know, is he trying to like make it look like that he is the origami killer? But at the same time, you'd think, well, if he did that, then surely he would have to stop killing himself. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, lad.
It's a weird one, because you think, like, if you want to get suspects off your... I mean, you know, like, it's pretty clear that, like, no one's really onto him anyway, so... But I feel like, yeah, if you wanted to frame someone else, you probably, like, don't go down this avenue. The only thing I can kind of explain why Scott does this is, if you've seen, like, you know, all the Saw films, there is a point where, you know, a dirty cop reenacts his own Saw trap. Hoffman, I believe his name is. And then eventually, you know, Jigsaw does put that guy in a trap himself, and kind of, like, you know, teaches him, like, oh yeah, like, because I think the guy Hoffman makes a trap that the guy can't win. The guy actually succeeds to the trap but still dies, and then Jigsaw is like, nah, you have to actually give them a way out. And then he's not a fan of the guy, like, kind of almost like polluting his art, if it was. So it might be that Scott isn't a fan of the fact that someone's trying to copy him, reenact his kills, because obviously we do come to learn that Goldie does actually, kill one of the kids. One of the kids isn't Scott's victims, it's Goldie's, because Goldie got a bit obsessed and was accidentally killed a child. So yeah, it's probably just the fact that he doesn't want him kind of damaging his art, and copying him in that sense.
Oh, interesting, because I completely forgot about the whole thing that Goldie did actually kill a child. So, but actually I think your point makes a lot of sense then, because I was thinking to myself, why is he gunning so hard to pin it on this guy? It didn't make a lot of sense. I thought his whole purpose was to just go and collect evidence off the various family members of the victim. So yeah, I mean, again, it's a little bit of a nice cutie thing. You're playing some golf, but there's not much else to it. And we are going to wrap up this analysis episode with trial 3 for Ethan, the lizard. Now, I think of all the trials, this has got to be the most gruesome one. Again, you talk about Saw, lad, this is something straight out of a Saw film, isn't it? Ethan rocks up and he's given 5 minutes, which I think is really good, by the way, because it's like you've genuinely got 5 minutes. It's not sort of 5 minutes in game time, it's 5 minutes in real life, to cut off a piece of your finger. And of course, as we know, there are various ways to do this, but I mean, mate, take the floor. What did you think of this scene in general?
Yeah, I remember I would have been, how old would I have been? 15 when Heavy Rain came out. And I remember first thinking this is disgusting. This is so gruesome. And I remember I feel like my stomach actually twisted a bit when I heard what the trial was. Because I was going around that. And it's just the whole art and environment of the location looking really grotty and dark. And I was like, oh no, this just adds to it. And yeah, my stomach really twisted in knots when I heard it. One little nitpick is when you're going to it, you've got the porcelain lizards outside. Obviously the little puzzle is the fact that there's a green lizard on the door, so the key's hidden in the green porcelain lizard. It's the second one you come across, so I feel like most people on their blind playthroughs pick that one up anyway and kind of find the lock before they find the key, as it were. So, I feel they should have planted it a little later or something. But still, though, that's just so nitpicky of me. But yeah, I mean, back to the trial. Like you say, the fact that you've got, the timer in the background, the fact that you've got all these tools scattered about. It makes it drums up the tension massively. And it's interesting because I always went for the alcohol and the stick with the flame at the end to kind of seal your wound back up, but I'd always go with the cleaver. It just seemed like the most logical weapon to me, because it's just one clean swift thing, chops it right off. But it wasn't until I played the stream recently that our fans taught us that you actually get a trophy for using the saw. So I did that this time, and it was interesting, using a different object. I mean, especially because there are a load you can pick. Some are scissors, one looks like a blunt butter knife, so I can't even imagine using them. It must be gnarly if you did. But yeah, it's one of those ones where it's really grim, and when you finally do it, you have to praise the voice acting, don't you, from the actor that plays Ethan. I think his name's Scowl. You really believe the pain and the cry, because it's not just a 10-second cry. It's not like in those supermassive games, where we looked at the Man of Medan DLC, where someone's loved one can fall in the electrical water, and then a second later their face goes back to being vacant and blank. Oh well. This is Ethan's crying for a solid 5 minutes, and then he's even unlocking the hangman. He's getting his next letters, and he's still crying as he does it. And yeah, Quantic Dream absolutely did a fantastic job of not only drumming up the tension, but kind of having that pain feeling afterwards. You really feel for Ethan afterwards. So yeah, the trials are really strong, and this is just another one that adds on top of it.
Oh, here. Honestly, I'm glad you mentioned the voice acting thing, because it's something I picked up on as well, and I was like, damn, that was actually so convincing as well. When you marry that up with the QTEs, how it sort of mirrors what he's doing as well. It's really agonizing. I feel as well even the whole thing beforehand. I mean, against the clock, so there's tension and there's the music. But you then got to like explore to like pick what weapon you're going to use to, you know, take off your finger, which is so sadistic and horrendous, isn't it? But also, like, you know, mentioning the trophies as well. I'll read them out here, mate. So one's called Goldfinger. It says, cut off your finger using axe, knife, or pliers, and disinfect or cauterize the wound. And then there's the Butcher, cut off your finger using the saw or scissor. So I'm guessing there that there's like 5 different ways to like remove your finger, which is insane. And on that point, you know how I said in like episode 1 that David Cage had like that the whole mall scene was inspired by a real event. Here's a bit of trivia for you.
Okay.
So David Cage said that this event was also taken from his real life because once he cut his finger. He did not state whether he cut it off or not, but it can be seen on his pictures. Another one is, if Ethan takes 3 or 4 drinks of whiskey, the screen will become blurry and he'll use different quieter screams after he cut his finger off.
Okay.
As far as like the voice acting goes, Pascal Langdale, who did Ethan's voice, he said that the finger cutting scene was one of his favourite to record, and that clearly comes through because it was actually a really good scene. And then the final one, because I feel like the trivia's been really light on this one, so I wanted to go a little bit more heavy on this final bit. It says that if Ethan chooses not to cut off his finger, he'll be later shot in the shoulder by a cop while escaping the apartment. To avoid getting shot by the police, he must either cut off his finger or fail to escape the apartment before the cops enter. So either way, it looks like he's got to lose a finger, but it's just what of the circumstances would be for him.
Oh wow, that is really interesting. I'm really glad you mentioned that because I had no idea about that bit. But yeah, like honestly, it's such a good trial because what I think is that the whole theme of this game, right? I think even on the back of like the old box art on the PS3, like, you know, game thing would say like, how far are you willing to go to save someone you love? So that is like the underlying theme for this game, right? And like, I feel with the first 2 trials, you complete them and it's like, oh, job done, right? Move on to the next one. We've done that and there's a relief. This one, you complete it, but there's no relief because you have to hear the guy cry for like a solid 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it really like, I think the trials are so well placed in the order they need to be, because like, even at this point, you do trial 3, you might be asking yourself, I don't know if I want to do trial 4 or 5. And it really kind of like makes you question, like, I mean, how far am I willing to go to save my own son? Because clearly, like, all the dads before Ethan reached a certain point where they either died trying or gave up. So, like, it really does make you think, wow, like, am I willing to do a 4th and 5th trial, whatever they may throw at me? Because if it's got to be worse than driving up a motorway the wrong way, going through an electrical plant with all these obstacles, and then chopping off your own finger. At this point on your blind playthrough, you're absolutely dreading what trials 4 and 5 are going to throw at you. So, yeah, I just think the whole thing is constructed fantastically.
And that's so true because I mean, like, they're all very dangerous situations, aren't they? Like, and the thing is, you got to weigh it up. Like, if he were to die in a trial, then he's definitely not going to get saved, isn't he? Which sort of comes back to the point that you were saying that is a little bit silly. How like when the letters get revealed, he can't just take it to the police and be like, you know, it's clearly Roosevelt. It's clearly Roosevelt. Right? Could we just go and have a little tour around because he's probably going to be in that area, so I don't have to do these sodding trials. But one thing, I actually have one more bit of trivia for you, lad. The alcohol in the apartment is Black Lamb malt Scotch whiskey. Do you recognise that at all?
Black Lamb?
Black Lamb malt Scotch whiskey. Do you recognise that from anywhere else?
Is it an Easter egg for a different game?
It is. Yeah.
So, well, if it's Heavy Rain, the only one before it would have been Fahrenheit. So it's Black Lamb from Fahrenheit.
Oh well, no. Actually, well, it's actually it's something that's then later used in Detroit Become Human. So Hank, he drinks the same drink in Detroit Become Human as well.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, final bit of trivia for you. But honestly, like, as we've been going through these, like the little links between like how you was mentioning about how like the nest and that was similar to the bit with Nathaniel and the chase earlier on. Maybe, because we've said for a little while that Supermassive and Telltale have sort of formulas for games, that maybe there's sort of under the surface there's a Quantic Dream one as well, because I'm starting to notice more and more little details like that. But yeah, I mean, that's it, guys. We've covered part 4 of our Heavy Rain analysis. Do come back next Sunday where we're going to be doing part 5. And from me, hope you enjoyed the video. Do let us know what your choices were for all of these scenes and what your thinking was up at this point in your blind playthrough. Liam, you got anything to add?
Sean!
It's not Jason anymore. Sean!
Yeah, I thought I'd mix it up.
Yeah. We'll catch you later, guys.
See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.